did you hear the news that President Biden finally made his first trip to the African continent as president during his last month of presidency? I know, that sounds strange. He hasn't visited the continent for the entire 4 years he's been president, but he does so in December of 2024. Why? Why now? Well, according to Business Insider Africa, it's because Biden is deeply concerned about the Russian-Chinese influence on the continent, and he is hoping to counterbalance it before he leaves his time as president. So in this video, we're going to dive into two specific recent examples of Russian-Chinese influence on the African continent and what the U.S. should be doing to improve U.S.-African relations. So let's dive in. All right, so during his first time on the African continent as president, Biden went to the country of Angola. Now, much of his time there was focused on the Lobito Corridor. If you don't know what that is, it's a railway connecting the DRC, Zambia, and Angola. And the purpose of this railway is to help DRC export its critical minerals to the US and to Europe, which has been pretty much dominated by China, allowing China to get ahead in a lot of industries. Now, there's a lot of ethics behind exporting these raw minerals. We're going to leave that for another time, another video. But in this short video, we're going to be talking about, is it good for the US to be investing in these kind of projects, and does it actually help our relations? Now, in my opinion, yes. Overall, I'm so happy that the US is finally waking up that we should invest more in Africa's infrastructure. Yes, we have done it before, but not at the level that China has been doing it. I always tell people I lived in Ethiopia for 8 years, and I have no idea what US aid did during those 8 years. And actually, I worked at the cafeteria inside the US Embassy when I first was in Ethiopia, so I should definitely have known. But I didn't. Whereas China, I could go all over the city of Addis Ababa and point to you what China did. It had built the African Union, the new train, lots of buildings, lots of roads. It was so easy to see what China did. And in my opinion, a lot of aid has strings attached to it. I think we can all agree on that. That's not good. However, at least you get some practical things out of it. And China is, for the most part, pretty good at investing in infrastructure and at things that people can see and touch and benefit from in their daily life. So in this example, I am actually happy that the US is investing in a railway so that there could be more exports. And I just hope that African governments and other stakeholders are putting lots of regulations in place to make sure that people living there are actually getting the benefit and that there are no ethical violations. So yes, I'm glad Biden, in his last month of being president, is finally waking up to investing in infrastructure. Now, example number 2 I wanted to share also comes from a Business Insider Africa story about Russia opening a Sambo center in Ethiopia. Now, this caught my eye, of course, because it said Ethiopia, but I didn't know what Sambo was because I'm not into martial arts. But apparently, the Soviet Union invented this in the 1920s, and it's pretty big. I listened to Joe Rogan talking about Sambo, so it's big. People know about it. I didn't, but other people know about it. And this is an example of not like a big infrastructure project, but of like Russian cultural influence on Ethiopia. And the whole reason behind Sambo is they're trying to help Ethiopian athletes work with Russian specialists to be able to compete in the African championships of Sambo and win. Now, on a totally unrelated note, if you've ever been to Ethiopia, one of the first things you'll notice is the blue taxis. It's called a Lada. It's a Russian car, and it's indestructible. When I was in Ethiopia, I took a Russian Lada all the time because that's what all the taxi drivers pretty much drive, and they literally are falling apart. Like, you can never shut the door. The steering wheel is kind of crazy. They're falling apart, but yet they last forever. So that's always like the example that comes to my mind when I think about Russian influence in Ethiopia. But anyways, getting back to the topic of this video, Russia is clearly trying to influence East Africa and the continent as a whole by doing projects like this. And here's where I think the US should really change our whole entire stance on US-African relations. I get approached all the time by U.S. aid or organizations who are doing work in Africa, and they always ask me, like, what do you think about this? And it's always some training program that's, I can just tell it's not really what's needed. And when I give them advice, like, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And they say, oh, well, nobody would ever fund that. But that's actually what's needed. So what I'm trying to say here is that if the U.S. really wanted to improve our relationship with African countries, there are the 4 things I say over and over must be done. First, tourism. Tourism creates foreign currency. It is massive for the economies, and there's so many cool places to see in Africa. I wish that the U.S. would just promote traveling to African countries. Go on a safari, climb Kilimanjaro, go to the beach, go to Cape Town, do whatever you want. Just travel to Africa because it's going to create more money for African countries, and plus it's going to be a great cultural exchange. Well, okay. Americans aren't known for being the best tourists, but I'm hoping that the ones that actually visit African countries will be some of the good ones. So all I can say is, yes, we should be promoting tourism to the African continent. Number 2, hiring from Africa. Now, I say this over and over because obviously what we do at Cradle, but U.S. businesses should be hiring from African countries. Instead of just going to the Philippines or India or Latin America, we should be building our SDR teams, our cold calling teams, hiring our VAs from somewhere like Zambia or Zimbabwe or Ethiopia or Kenya. There is great talent there. It's a huge win for U.S. companies, especially small and medium businesses. Contrary to what most people believe, it doesn't actually take jobs away from Americans, and it's another great win-win. Okay, the third thing that we should be doing if we want to improve U.S.-African relations is helping promote more fair-made products. Now, notice I did not say fair trade. Fair trade isn't so fair. Fair made is completely different. It is value-added products. So instead of exporting the raw cocoa, it is exporting a chocolate bar. It's so much better for African communities. Plus, the products are generally better than if you just export the raw commodity anyways. And it's a huge win. Imagine if the U.S. supported more value-added products in Africa, and then we purchase them and we put them in our grocery stores. Again, it would create huge benefit in African countries. Now, the 4th thing, I call it the fishing rod principle. It's based off a Trevor Noah quote that says something like, the saying has always been, don't give someone a fish, teach them how to fish. But the part that is missing is that you have to give them the fishing rod. And that's what this big infrastructure deal that Biden came to Angola for is about. It is giving the fishing rod. It's giving the actual railway so that more exports can come through to the U.S. Now, that's one big example, but it could also be donating machinery so that people could actually make the chocolate bars. Things like that. So overall, yes, the U.S. maybe is slowly waking up to the fact that we should be investing in African countries and seeing them as business partners. But the best way to do that is to promote more tourism to the continent, to hire from the continent, to buy value-added, fair-made products, and to continue to invest in the fishing rod, which could be a railroad, it could be factory equipment, it could be anything that actually helps things like AGOA, which is supposed to increase importing from the continent. It makes it actually work. So that's my 2 cents. Tell me below, are you worried about Russian and Chinese influence in Africa? If so, tell me more in the comments. I cannot wait to read them and hear what you think.